Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and today we are talking early childhood education and workforce readiness. This series topic is talent found, and that's creating the Colorado talent pipeline. There are many paths to one destination, a successful career. Talent found helping students, job seekers, workers, and businesses find the tools, resources, and services they need to design their own unique path to success. Through Talent Found, affiliates are helping individuals and businesses discover ability, develop talent, and find success. We have with us today on this Talent Found wagon is oh my goodness, Lee Wheeler Berliner, excuse me. And
That's the first time that name has been mispronounced.
Well, I apologize for that. But Lee is the Assistant Director for the Colorado Workforce Development Council, which started the Talent Found, creating the Colorado Talent Pipeline. And so Colorado Workforce Development Council is a dynamic partnership between workforce development, economic development, education, business, and government. And the CWDC is a government-appointed business-led coalition of state agencies and their regional and local partners working to align the efforts of workforce and economic development, education training within the industry's needs to better serve students, job seekers, workers, and businesses throughout Colorado. The CWDC advises the governor and the Colorado legislature. I would like to be able to talk today, I promise you that, on policy matters related to all programs and activities across agencies and partners related to developing and strengthening Colorado's talent pipeline. The vision of the CWDC is that every Colorado business has access to skilled workforce and that every Coloradan has access to meaningful employment, resulting in statewide economic vitality. So thank you, Lee, for joining us, and I promise not to call you we anymore.
Sounds good, Alex. Thanks so much for having us today.
Yeah.
So we are excited to dig into the topic of early childhood education and really explore the business and economic impacts of the sector, as well as the challenges that our state is currently facing and some of the strategies in place to overcome that. I'm joined today by a few different folks. I'm pleased to welcome Kristina Heyl, who's the director of the Early Childhood Leadership Commission. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And we're also joined in this segment by Kelly Causey, who is the president and CEO of the Colorado Children's Campaign.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So a flourishing early childhood sector is really integral to a strong economy. And that is something that the state of Colorado believes very deeply. Obviously, the state has developed an Early Childhood Leadership Commission to focus on that sector. So let's talk a little bit about the sector first. Kristina, is the early childhood sector flourishing right now?
Sure. Well, thanks, Lee. We've seen significant gains over the past few years in early childhood in our state. We've built a system to measure and track quality of care, which we call Colorado Shines, which helps us be able to improve the quality of the early childhood centers and family homes where our kids are. We also have what we call a professional development information system. That is a platform that provides training and courses for our early childhood educators to continue their own professional development. We know that the number of kids who do not have health care has dropped significantly, and that's been great. It's helped lead to an increased opportunity for kids to get the screenings that they need and to be able to get those healthy mile markers along the way. We have a better understanding of school readiness and what it means for our kids to be able to be ready to go to school and be ready to succeed. And we know more about factors around emotional and behavioral supports that help them be ready in that environment. Our state's also done a lot in terms of our governance structure around early childhood. So over the past several years, we've created the Office of Early Childhood, as well as the Early Childhood Leadership Commission, which I'm happy to share a little bit more with you. So I think overall, there's a lot happening in the early childhood space. There's incredible partnerships across the state and local levels, but there's always more to do, and we certainly are seeing some big gaps in certain parts of this work.
Okay, so a lot of positives and definitely some places to focus in moving forward.
Yeah,
Do you
absolutely.
see distinctions in the sector in the urban parts of our state versus the rural parts, and what are some of the differences there?
Sure. We see a lot of the same needs across our state. So, for example, access to childcare we know is a problem everywhere. We have what we call deserts, childcare deserts, so places where we don't have adequate licensed capacity for the number of kids that we know we have, and we see that everywhere. We also know that not just access to care, but having quality childcare, how important that is for our kids and for their for the outcomes that they reach as they grow. Making sure that they have quality places to go is really important, and that we see that need everywhere.
Okay, great.
We also, just in terms of the workforce, we hear stories from all of our communities, from our urban, our rural, our frontier, that finding and accessing a qualified and sustainable workforce is a problem everywhere.
Okay. So tell us more about the Early Childhood Leadership Commission and how are you all set up to look at this issue?
Sure. So the commission, I'll call it the ECLC, the Early Childhood Leadership Commission, is our state's advisory council on all things early childhood. So we have members that are appointed by the governor, and we have representatives from businesses. We have early childhood providers, we have health and behavioral health representatives, school districts, local government, parents are at that table, and then we have 5 different state agencies as well. And the purpose of this group is to look into the systems that affect kids' lives from the time that they're born until they're 8 years old and their families. And the commission really looks at overseeing what's happening on all those different systems and tries to align and connect and make sure that we as a state are using our resources in the most effective way that provides efficient and seamless experiences for kids and for parents in that age range.
Okay.
Our, some of our responsibilities, we're outlined in statute. We are charged to monitor and align those systems. So when we think about health or education, we advocate for resources and are always looking for opportunities around policies or funding to help support this work. And then making recommendations to the General Assembly, to the State Departments, and our governor's office around best practices and things that we can do to better support this
Okay.
age range.
So really a focus on collaboration and some public-private partnership aspects as well, and getting members from the state, from the business community, from the government agencies, from the private sector to really talk about this and ultimately make some recommendations.
Absolutely.
I want to bring Kelly into the conversation. Kelly, tell us a little bit about the Colorado Children's Campaign and how your work fits into this early childhood sector.
You bet. The Colorado Children's Campaign, we see ourselves as partners with the Commission and in their important work that they do. For over 30 years, the Colorado Children's Campaign has been a leading voice for children at the state capitol. And so we value, of course, early care and education, and that's one of our priorities. And we're also a research, policy, and advocacy organization, and so we see ourselves in a role in partnership with the Commission and others that we look at research-based state policy. We look at the systems within the state that affect children and see that the work that we do with legislators to provide research-based good state policies that help improve the well-being of children is one of our, it's why we're in business. It's what we do and how we see that as effective for impacting children. And so when we look at the framework that the Commission has developed, and we've been very active with that and partners with them on it, and value in particular the 3 primary domains that they elevate in the framework around family support and education, health and well-being, learning and development. And for the Children's Campaign, we put the child at the center of that system, at the heart of those 3 domains and where they intersect, and see it as a responsibility of all of us in Colorado to make sure that the early care and education systems work for children, and that helps all of us to be better at what we do, to be a better state when our children are at their best.
Okay. And one of the things we repeatedly hear in our work around talent development in Colorado is that it's a statewide approach, but it's a local issue. And a lot of the best strategies are developed locally. Mm-hmm. So what are the local mechanisms in place looking at early childhood, and how do they connect in with the ECLC?
Well, I think that it's important to think about this early childhood education space at a variety of levels, and so certainly from the Commission's perspective, we're looking at what those state levels are that we have to pull on. We're looking at federal opportunities as well, certainly, but we see a lot of our local communities that are incredibly creative and are driving change at that local level. We have a series of early childhood councils around the state that serve as sort of an intermediary role where they're on the ground and they're supporting those teachers and those centers and family homes. They work with their local partners to figure out how can we better support the workforce, how can we make sure that we're continuing to bring people into this field and support them when they're there. I would say that we've seen city governments or county governments take on different, whether it's through funding or through taxes or through a variety of ways to think about their specific community and what they want to do. So I think it's something that we need to think about at all levels, but certainly there are some great community champions.
Okay, great. What are some of the early wins of this work and the work of the ECLC?
Sure. I would start by saying over the past several years, we've had incredible support from this governor and the administration, thinking about the creation of the Office of Early Childhood. So bringing together programs and services and work that affect the early childhood space. This office pulled those in together, and so we see a lot more collaboration across our programs, thinking about our Colorado preschool program, our early literacy programs, thinking about our childcare centers and licensing and things like that, as well as supports for families, so things like home visiting supports or child maltreatment prevention. So having all of that together has really I think brought us a lot further in the state in terms of early childhood work. We, as a state, were fortunate to receive a Race to the Top grant, which brought a lot of funding into our state several years ago to help build some of these systems as well. And so that was a huge win. Two things with the commission that I would love to focus on. One thing that Kelly mentioned around the Early Childhood Colorado Framework. So this is a document that the commission led the revision of a few years ago, where we said, what is our shared vision for kids, and what are the outcomes that we would want to ensure that all kids can meet to make sure that they are healthy and valued and are thriving in our state. So those revolve around the domains of health and well-being and learning and development, family support and education, but really keeping the child at the center of that. So we've seen that that framework document embraced across the state and in a variety of sectors. And so that's something that we're really proud of. A second piece of work the Commission's been working on is really around this workforce. How do we elevate? How do we sustain an early childhood workforce? And so at the state level, we've been bringing together agencies to think about what role does housing play into our early childhood workforce? What role does healthcare and overall well-being for our teachers play in this? How can we bring in businesses and have organizations help support this and think about creative ways to help support this workforce? So at the state level, there's some really great partnerships happening, and also with partners across the state who are able to do more of the research and understand the economic impact and some of the advocacy levers around there as well. So this has been a huge focus for the Commission over the past few years.
Okay, great. In our work with the Colorado Workforce Development Council, we often hear from industries that they have talent issues. And despite the rapid growth in population in Colorado, there's still a struggle to get the right workforce in place in many sectors. And it sounds like early childhood is no different. When we think about it as a sector and as an employer, there are some struggles. What's some of the information you all are seeing behind that? What are some of the issues that are really showing up right now?
Well, I'll take the lead and then jump in, Kristina. I think if we think about the supply and demand, about 2/3 of Colorado children under the age of 6 have all available parents in the workforce. And so on the one hand, great, we're in this booming economy and we want people working, and businesses certainly want them available. And yet on the supply side, we're not meeting the demand in terms of providing high quality early care for children. And so I think that puts pressures in lots of ways on all of us. But from what you're describing, Lee, around the perspective of businesses, if parents are having to choose between being in the workforce or staying at home to care for our children because there isn't access to high quality care, or it's not affordable, or for those many reasons. If they aren't able to have that, they can't be in the workforce, and then businesses aren't able to meet their workforce needs that they have, let alone retain them once they do have them. And so there's just a lot of pressure because we haven't yet in our state aren't able to meet the demand for what families are needing.
Absolutely. Just to piggyback on that, we know that right now we have these huge challenges, and looking to the future, when we look at from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on folks that are moving in here, we're anticipating between a 33 and 42% increase in the need for these early childhood educators in the future, in the next 10 years. So we're already facing some crisis levels in places in our state, and it's only going to get harder to fill that. So we've got to figure out a way, and we've got to figure out multiple ways to address this workforce issue.
Okay, so as we get more people, there's more kids who have a need. And I know there's research around the differences in someone in their readiness for kindergarten, whether they've been just in the home with a parent versus in an early childhood education setting. What are some of those details and implications kind of from that perspective on the long-term health of the state?
I'll jump in on that again. I know we're both excited about the topic, but I think it's an important question, Lee, because the evidence shows, and it's compelling. We have we know what we need to do, and have the evidence to show that the investments we make right now in early care and education have a huge payoff. One, in terms of the school readiness, as you described, we know that children do best when they're in high quality settings. It puts them on track then to start kindergarten off on the right path. They'll be reading on pace in third grade. And when we look longer term even, of the achievement gap. And when we focus on that in the K through 12 setting, we know, though, that it's really potentially an opportunity gap in which, had that child been in a high quality early learning setting, they would be able to then, and the brain science shows us this too, they would be able to then be on track, close the achievement gap by closing that opportunity gap. And so I think we have the evidence we need to show, if we make the investments now in this early care and education sector, that it's going to pay off down the road. It's hard to get, I think, for many of us, but it's hard to get businesses in particular, or the community more broadly, to have that longer term view, because we're in a culture in which we want immediate payback right this second. But we have the evidence in front of us, and so we know it works, and we know it's less expensive to make the investments now than it is to do interventions down the road when we don't have kids on track.
I would just add that in terms of what we're learning about brain science and how brains are developed, so much is happening from the time the child is born. And so if we wait until they're 5 years old and they're going to kindergarten, we've missed years, literally years of such an important time to build those connections for kids, to allow them to have social and emotional regulation, and just be ready to enter school. And so it's just absolutely critical that we support kids from the time that they're born.
Well, and I would imagine too that parents, it's cheaper in the long run for them if we start early enough, right? It saves you money on tutors, right? It's my parents spent a lot of money on a math tutor, so I can attest to that for you.
So there's a key word, Kelly, that you brought up, and Kristina, you mentioned as well earlier, and that is high quality. When we say high quality early childhood education versus something else, what does that mean? Kristina, you mentioned we have some systems in place to look at quality. So what's happening in that arena?
Sure. So we in Colorado have a system called Colorado Shines, where we're able to look at childcare centers and homes and see what types of building blocks they have in place to support kids. So when we think about quality, we're thinking about the interactions that they're able to have with teachers, those consistent relationships that they're able to build. We're thinking about how the language that they're hearing, and hopefully not just sat in front of a television, but singing songs and having a teacher that's interacting with them. And so those are some pieces around quality that we feel are really important. Anything that you'd want to add to that?
Well, we'll be, I'm sure, hearing a lot more from it with our next guest too. But yes, what you've described, I think, is right on par.
Okay.
A couple other things just to add to that, when their learning environments are quality, so the materials that they have in the room and that they're able to use and pick up and play with and maneuver. We also think about family engagement and how are those educators working with the families in the community and helping support them. We know it's not easy to raise children, so how can we support families and parents and caregivers in any way? We also look at some of the health or well-being things that a program might have and what they offer around health promotion. And then also just thinking about the health of the business as well. If you have a small business or large centers, are they operating well? How are they functioning? What does the turnover look like in staff? So just a few other things to mention around that quality piece.
Okay. So in our second segment, we will be joined by Kathryn Harris, who is the CEO of Qualistar, and she will dig into that issue a little bit more with us and really help us to understand some of the economic issues that show up and surround this. I want to share a quote titled The Business Case for Early Childhood, and this is coming from a report from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. The report was titled Workforce of Today and Workforce of Tomorrow. And they state that childcare is unique among early childhood programs because, if done right, it can serve two crucial purposes simultaneously: ensuring the healthy development of young children while enabling their parents to contribute as productive members of the workforce. So there really are two big sides to this coin that I'm hearing. One is, regardless of what means someone has, there's opportunities to engage with a young child in the 0 to 5 range because of the importance of education, because of the things happening, the chance for them to learn in a quality environment and be challenged can help set that student up for lifelong success, that child up for lifelong success. And then the other side of that coin is freeing up a parent to be a productive member of the workforce, to be able to go into a job each and every day knowing that their child is in a safe and stable environment and moving forward. So it's a big economic imperative there. And would you all say that our state is okay, or are we starting to see some of the economic impacts of that right now?
I think just to throw in, I think you're spot on around this really being an economic driver. We see that in our local, in our communities across the state. A recent report that just came out last year focused on Colorado. It's called Bearing the Cost of Early Care and Education, an Economic Analysis. And it found that for every dollar that we spend in the early care and education sector, the return on investment for that is $2.25 that comes back. So that off the bat we know is an incredible return when you're looking at different systems. When we think about that enabling factor that you were talking about, Lee, when you have a safe, healthy environment for your child to go in so that you can go to work and participate in your economy, in Colorado, that has an annual return in earnings of $4.4 billion in our state. And when you look at other industries, that's a huge number, a huge investment for this industry. So we know it's a huge impact. We know that when communities are trying to bring businesses into their local communities, childcare is a big issue that many times people will ask about. Do you have adequate care? What does the education system look like? So we know this is a huge economic driver.
Okay.
And I'll also add to that of that same report, for every job created in the Colorado early care and education sector, 1.5 jobs is created from that. And so I think in combination between the financial return on investment, that's $2.25 for every dollar, 1.5 jobs created for every job. When you present that, it makes a great case for why the investment is so important as an economic driver.
Okay.
Kristina, before you leave us for this next segment, how can people find out more about Early Childhood Leadership Commission, or ECLC as you like to
Yes,
call
absolutely. We have all of our information, all of our agendas for meetings and everything like that on our website. It's earlychildhoodcolorado.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll be right back here on Connect and Collaborate. Stay with us, and be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page in the meantime. Thank you so much. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer. And today we're talking about Talent Found, creating the Colorado talent pipeline. And more specifically, we're focusing on early childhood education and workforce readiness. And our guest here today is Lee Wheeler-Berliner. And again, he's the Assistant Director of the Colorado Workforce Development Council, which is a dynamic partnership between workforce development, economic development, education, business, and government. And the vision of the CWDC is that every Colorado business has access to a skilled workforce and that every Coloradan has access to meaningful employment, resulting in a statewide economic vitality. And so we're focusing on that early part of that workforce readiness, right?
Absolutely, Alex. Thank you. And it's a great way to highlight within that vision, businesses need workers, and they need workers who are able to show up and know that their family is safe wherever they are. Coloradans need access to meaningful employment. They need access to the skills they get, which means if I'm a parent and I'm trying to find the right trainer, trying to find that job, I need to make sure I have childcare taken care of. And also it starts our kids and our youth and students out for success in the long run. So excited to dig into this issue a little bit deeper. We started to get into the economic impacts of the early childhood sector in the last segment, and we want to dig into that and talk more, and then look at some strategies that businesses are employing and what communities are doing to really try to solve some of these issues. First, I want to introduce Kathryn Harris, who is the president and CEO of Qualistar. She is joining us for this part of the conversation. Kathryn, welcome. Can you share with us a little bit about your agency and your connection to this work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. So I run Qualistar Colorado for the last 20 years. Our organization has been focused on improving the quality of childcare for all children. We do this primarily by working with teachers serving children ages birth to 8. We support them through professional development. We provide scholarships for higher education and grants to enable teachers to make improvements to their indoor and outdoor learning environments. We also play a large role in helping the state administer its quality rating system. So during the last segment, Kristina talked about Colorado Shines. So my organization is responsible for going out and visiting about 1,000 childcare programs every year and evaluating their quality and creating a quality rating. And the quality rating is good for two purposes. The first purpose is really helping parents really understand what is quality early care and education, so that they, if they're able to afford it, to make that choice. And the second reason is to help improve the quality of childcare across the state. We know that historically we've had very poor levels of quality across our state in our early learning programs, and our state has been working hard through the rating system to help programs define their quality level and help them move up that quality ladder so that we can have more high quality programs. Today, about 20% of our programs, licensed childcare programs across Colorado, are high quality, and we still have a lot of work to move the rest of them up. The last thing that we work on at Qualistar is advocating. We advocate for the workforce, for higher compensation, for clear educational and career pathways. And we also advocate that our low-income children have access to high-quality care, because we know that they benefit the most, and we work closely with the Colorado Children's Campaign in order to do this work.
Okay, great. So as we talk about this as an economic issue, what are some of the impacts that you are seeing on the broader economy because of some of these concerns in the childhood workforce?
We talked a little bit last segment. You guys talked a little bit about the fact that it is an enabling sector for all other industries. So when we don't have high quality available childcare, businesses have a really hard time finding the workforce they need, or the workforce is has productivity issues because they're worried about their children not being in safe and consistent environments. They worry that they're in environments that they're not learning. So we really see that the challenge of not having a thriving early childhood sector, which we don't right now, is that businesses struggle to keep and retain their workforce because families are having to make the choice to pull themselves out of the workforce in order to be able to take care of their children.
And I'll add a little bit more to that too. I think we see it as a triple bottom line, that if we have the adequate, affordable, high quality care that we need, of course, the child does better. The family does better because they want to support their family. They don't want to be on public assistance. They want to be able to have the opportunities for their child and for their families that comes through being active in the workforce and fully participating. And we've seen a huge difference in women's labor workforce participation when there's been childcare available for families. And the other piece I'll emphasize is that it's also a benefit to the community. Communities do better when businesses are thriving, and so I think there's a huge impact on communities being able to provide what they need for their children and their families, but they do better when businesses do, and so we need this available to be able to have the kind of workforce that businesses want.
So when we think about who is impacted by a lack of quality, affordable care, it's not just one family or one child. It's really broader impacts, right?
I would say everybody listening to this and those that aren't even listening to it, everyone is impacted. Everyone is impacted by the lack of quality, affordable care. And of course, the child is impacted by that, and parents and families and businesses. But one of the phrases I've heard from in a community was that, quote, everybody relies on somebody who relies on childcare. And I think we've all been in situations, whether it's me, if it's other friends or family members, we've all been in situations where somebody couldn't show up to something, whether it's work or a family occasion or a big event, because they didn't have childcare. The childcare fell through. And so all of us are impacted by this.
Yeah, and there's economic data out there that shows that that because of employee absenteeism related to a breakdown in childcare results in about a $3 billion loss a year nationally.
Wow.
So it really has a significant impact. And then you think about that's absenteeism, but you think about productivity. When a working parent is at the office and they are concerned about was the transfer able to be made from the morning program to the afternoon program, and did the caregiver show up? I mean, that really is going to impact your ability to do your job well because you're focused on your family.
So businesses really need to think about their own talent and their pipeline and how this issue impacts their employees and what they can do. Ultimately, we know there is a gap and a lack of available license capacity in many parts of the state. To share a few numbers with you all, in Mesa County, as an example, there is just under 10,000 kids between the ages of 0 to 5 in the county, and there are fewer than 5,000 licensed child care slots available that they can utilize. In Larimer County, some data that they show is that they have approximately 4,400 kids 0 to 2 years who are in need of placement and only 1,100 licensed spots. So a gap of more than 3,300 kids in the 0 to 2 range, another gap of 3,300 kids versus the slots available in their 2 to 5 and kind of that pre-K population. So that's something I assume you all see in other parts of the state playing out as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Kristina in the last segment spoke a little bit about the concept of childcare deserts. And as she mentioned, those are areas where there are more kids under the age of 5 than there are childcare slots available for them. And 46% of Colorado is a childcare desert. That's a big problem. And it doesn't discriminate between urban and rural areas.
Okay. So what are some of the things we need to do as a state to focus on increasing the availability and getting more of these spots opened up?
Well, it's a multi-pronged strategy,
So where do we
right?
start?
So increasing the availability. So we've recognized that there's significant gaps. I think that, we need to tackle this problem both at a local level and a state level. I think the first thing is you got to get really clear about your data in your local community. How many kids are there under 5? How many childcare providers are there? How many kids can fill those slots? What are the biggest challenges facing those childcare businesses? Is it workforce? So what's your gap in number of slots? What's your challenge related to workforce? And then what are the local strategies that those communities can work on to close those gaps? And then there's a whole slew of options. But Kristina also spoke at the last segment about our early childhood councils. So there are 34 of these across the state. That's a great place for businesses to connect and say, help me understand the data and how this is impacting my workforce. And how can I partner with you or other businesses to help address some of these challenges?
So if I'm running a company and I know I have some turnover issues and I want to lower that turnover rate, and I've heard some ad hoc information that people are telling me they're resigning because of childcare, there's somebody I can turn to actually get some more hard data that I can look at to make business decisions around how to change that, right?
Absolutely, and I think one of the important pieces is that the business doesn't have to go at it alone. When you're working with your local community and your early childhood council or your chamber of commerce, I think then there becomes opportunities to how do we partner to address this issue? How do we, do we think about helping to subsidize care for our employees? Are we a big enough company that we can think about opening up our own child care center within our company? There's a wonderful statewide tax credit called the Child Care Contribution Tax Credit. If businesses or individuals give to this give to programs that benefit from this tax credit, they can take a 50% write-off on those dollars at the end of the year, up to $200,000. So those are strategies to get businesses investing in our early childhood system.
And I'll also add to that I think business can play a huge role. It's still one of the most influential voices in American politics. Colorado's no different. And I think for the business community to have a voice not only at the state level, and through our work we partner with folks to do this, but I think for business leaders to be able to use their voice, to partner with others in their community to help elevate the challenges that they're facing. The part of not going it alone means everyone in the state is impacted, is struggling with this, and I think collectively the business community could have a strong impact on making those changes if there's a collective will to voice that and take part in it. And I would encourage business leaders to have a longer view. Typically when I have worked with business leaders over the years, it would be they're very focused on their next quarter's earnings and having the shorter term view. And I think the longer view of what can we be doing right now to help their current workforce, but also it's a longer term investment on their future workforce by making the investments now. And so I would make that encouragement also to think longer term.
Yeah, I think it's hard for business because there's so much great work happening in our high schools right now to think about how do we scale up our children, our high school students who may or may not be going right into college, but maybe looking towards going into the workforce, and so that's fabulous. But as Kelly says, we have to think of those early years where we talked about brain development is so robust in those first 5 years. And the more we can do to invest in high quality early learning experiences for those kids, the more they're going to enter our school system on even footing. The more we're going to have less issues around having big gaps in kind of academic achievement, and the more kids that are going to be prepared to go on for success post-secondary. The data's there. And I told Lee when I met with him the other day, I said, there's this great saying in our space is never have we known so much about what's going on with early brain development and the impact of a dollar spent investing in that and the downstream economic impacts and done so very little.
Okay. So when we think about opportunities for businesses to engage, this is not just a request for a contribution. There's really benefits, and businesses can look at this and examine their own benefits package to see how they are supporting childcare, whether it's through flexible scheduling and working with parents from a family-friendly practice perspective to hardcore financial benefits of childcare contributions and taking advantage of the tax credit that was mentioned, but then also looking at other ways that individuals can partner. I know in Mesa County, there are businesses who are coming together to form a sector partnership and support this issue of expansion of childcare slots. I mentioned they have a gap of about 5,000 slots at least. Their short-term focus is to increase the number of quality childcare slots to 8,000. And so that's going to be a sizable increase. And there's a number of businesses at that table looking at how we can join in. How can we help to open up more slots and spaces? Our theme with the Colorado Workforce Development Council, we're about supporting the job seeker. And so I want to talk about the workforce a little bit of the early childhood sector, because many people will say that there's a lack of skilled workers to enter this sector. And so that contributes to the lack of available spaces because we don't have the teachers to contribute. Right. Let's talk about that issue a little bit. What is happening around professional development for individuals who may seek to enter in as employees in this sector?
Yeah, I think we have a challenge in this sector because it's a low compensated sector. There's statistics out there that, or data out there that talks about early childhood teachers make less money than dog daycare centers. That's infuriating. I love my dog, and I love that my dog's having a great time right now at the doggy daycare, but that is not what's happening in those early childhood programs where brain connections, 700 new neural connections every second during the first 3 years of life. So the qualifications of our early childhood workforce need to be high to be able to support strong early brain development, social emotional development, physical development, yet the compensation is not there. So like our average teacher wage is like $11.32. So it's very hard to earn a living sustainable wage. So there's a real paradox between what a qualified early childhood teacher needs to know and what they're being paid. And that brings a challenge into bringing more people into this workforce. There's also we lose a lot of teachers to K-12. So you have teachers that get skilled up in the early childhood space and they say, oh my gosh, well, I can go and be a kindergarten teacher and make $15,000 more. So there's kind of a policy issue that needs to be addressed here so that we can attract the type of workforce that we need, that we've talked about, that is so important for our working parents and for our children.
And that's where I think the business community and the notion we spoke of earlier of looking at their local level to say, what can we do locally to attract the talent we want? Wage is certainly an important part of it. And are there other incentives that we can offer to attract people to want to come to that community or to stay in that community and to be in that particular sector or to be in that on that career path so that folks will want to stay in it and want to be able to provide the kind of care that businesses need for their employees.
Great.
Well, one of the things I'm really excited about right now is that we've been having a lot of conversations around career pathways for early childhood professionals. And our state has done such tremendous work over the last few years of picking high priority occupations and industry sectors and figuring out how to create a smart, clear career pathway so that people can see what educational steps they have to take to get to jobs, and then how they can get to the next level and how they can specialize and develop different skills and still impact that sector. And so we're starting to have these conversations of how can we create this for early childhood so we can build a much stronger set of career options and then thinking how do we actually integrate that with K-12 so that we're building a robust sector for all the growth and development of our kids.
Sure. And one of the themes our regular listeners will recall in Connect and Collaborate is around the concept of apprenticeships and how that's being expanded far beyond what's traditionally been thought of as an apprenticeable industry in the construction field and in the skilled trades. And we now have that within childcare.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. We actually have a federal registered apprenticeship with Red Rocks Community College. We have some awesome new opportunities, workforce grants that have come out, and they'll be building 2 new apprenticeship programs, one in Denver, and then also looking at building one in Larimer County. They're wonderful ways to get educated, to take higher ed classes, but then also to apply what you're learning in the classroom back in the early childhood program and get mentoring and support along the way. We think it is definitely the gold standard, I think, in terms of how you prepare a strong workforce. And I think another great thing about apprenticeships is they really think about what are those compensation bumps that happen along the way that reward upskilling and developing more competencies.
And is this a field that is closely tied to degrees and the idea that there has to be a 4-year degree, or are there opportunities to really look at the competencies of the staff in childcare centers to have a competency-based approach to getting the right people in there?
I think that's a great question. I think that research, certainly there's tremendous research that says that a early childhood teacher with a bachelor's that has specialization in the early childhood field is going to have a higher impact, success rate, opportunity to develop that child. However, I think that we really do need to look at competency-based as well, and I think we have to look at, are we eliminating some people from being able to enter our field because that is too big of a barrier for them. And I think we just need to be very thoughtful on how we approach this. And that's what gets me excited about these career pathway conversations. You get the businesses at the table, you get the educators at the table, you get the workforce development councils at the table, and you really figure out what are the minimum qualifications for each of these jobs and how do we get more diverse candidates into these roles.
And we've seen with other apprenticeships that as an entry level, it can attract someone who might be interested in that field or have direct experience and be able to match their competencies to what's offered in the apprenticeship, and it baits them into then potentially wanting the 4-year degree or staying in it longer to stair step to get the skills they need because they see the compensation attached to elevating their skills or advancing their competencies. And it also then is that entryway to go, oh, okay, now that I know what I'm doing, now that I have this direct experience, that 4-year degree is within my reach. I could accomplish that and be able to then either move into other higher levels of educational demands. They might want to then go to a different grade level or work with a different age group, but it begins to build a longer term pipeline because we were able to meet people where they were at and match then their competencies and their inspirations and what they want to be doing with that just first approach of saying the degree is not going to be the barrier. Let's bring you into this apprenticeship, build those competencies, and then hope that they'd pursue it.
Right. And connecting back to the quality conversation we were having, when you think about a high quality childcare setting, these are not unskilled individuals in the classroom.
Absolutely not.
Right.
Right. So whether it's a degree that they have, in many cases a master's degree, a lot of experience, a lot of competencies to be working with kids and doing the right activities for brain development.
Right.
The data that we see in the Colorado Talent Pipeline report puts childcare administrators in a top job category because there's continued growth in demand, and at that level you see higher wages than at the teacher level, but getting somebody along the way is still a challenge a little bit. And so the career pathways work we're looking to do in this sector is definitely in supportive of how can we help to expand opportunities statewide, how can we increase the number of slots, and how can we get the right workforce in place to move this work forward. We've talked about business engagement, highlighted the idea of getting involved with your early childhood council and your community. There are sector partnerships forming in Mesa County, in Larimer County, in Denver County as well. So there's a lot of exciting things happening. Several of those areas are looking at co-op models with businesses making financial contributions to set up childcare on site or have dedicated slots for their employees within some facilities. So as our time comes to a close, what are some other ways you all can see for businesses to really get involved and help move this issue forward in our state?
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to highlight was we have a statewide organization, nonprofit called Executives Partnering to Invest in Children, and they work to bring together businesses, business leaders to learn about why the sector is so important, to be able to equip them with approaches to increase their level of support for working parents, and energize them to be voices and advocate for increased support for working parents, both through public and private kind of strategies. One of the things they've done recently is they put together a family-friendly toolkit, or family-friendly businesses. Oh, I've got it right here. Family-friendly workplace toolkit, and they also have a kind of a 15-minute survey. So if you go to their website, it is coloradoepic.org. Yep, coloradoepic.org. You can see the survey right there, and it really helps a business see if they do they have family-friendly practices. Go ahead, I'm sorry. And so things that would be family-friendly practices is, are they providing a living wage? Not just a minimum wage, but a living wage where it covers the necessities of life. Are they providing comprehensive health benefits? What do their paid leave policies look like? It's crazy in our state, in our country, that we by and large don't pay for parents to take time off after they've had a child. Millions of Americans aren't offered a single day of work following the birth of a child, and 1 in 4 moms go back to work 10 days after childbirth. So this is just an issue that businesses need to be thinking about, and are we a family-friendly business?
And quickly, before we end, where can we find you guys, your websites?
coloradokids.org, and we have plenty of data to help inform business leaders.
Yeah, and we're qualistar.org.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on today. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.